Well, excellent. Thanks for the intro, and it's fantastic to be with you again. And we saw you last time at VES. I'm Martin Hall. I'm a visual effects supervisor and an educator, as was mentioned, at Noman School of Visual Effects, and also a member of the Visual Effects Society coming out of Los Angeles. So yeah, I've worked all around the world. Started back in the late 90s, about 90, 95, 96, coming out of film school in Los Angeles. I've kind of done a little of all of it, from the lighting and shooting side of it to the practical as well. Started lighting and shooting out of school with low budget LA Hollywood extravaganzas, shoot 'em ups and all that fun. But it was a great learning experience. Lighting and shooting, second unit was my starting point and passion for cinema. Slid into this world of visual effects kind of, by accident. Coming into it as a youngster, thinking out it'd be great to work in visual effects. How do I get there? And it just kind of slid into the world of lighting and shooting model miniatures. On a very small scale, and then find myself working on Bruckheimer films like Armageddon, Con Air, etc. So, at this point, I really kind of felt, well, this is fantastic. Visual effects is awesome, and this is a fantastic synthesis of science, technology, and practical and physical, and technological, and even business. All the disciplines, and the great creative collaboration. So I think I really kind of fell in love with visual effects at this point in time. It was like, yeah, this is amazing. This is super fun, and it's a great, amazing collaboration. Armageddon, as was mentioned, some really cool pinnacle projects. From there, I kind of evolved, working more and more into the digital aspect of it, between lighting and shooting on practical model miniature shoots. And, I kind of just worked from the ground up, lighting and shooting, comping and cleanups and restoration projects and all that here around Hollywood and Los Angeles. A couple of key projects that were quite fun to work on was John Adams is a good example. A great project that also ties into environment builds. I really kind of love history, and the recreation of reality is fantastic, and trying to make it look and feel organic and invisible as a visual effects, but really to tell part of the story, and to set mood, and to set your characters in the world. So this is a fantastic and really gritty and hard project. We were lucky enough to get an Emmy for. Similarly, on the other end of the spectrum, really crazy, hard, and yet to be done things like American Horror Story Freak Show. So another really challenging project in which, again, we were blessed by our peers with an Emmy. Challenging work. Over time, I've evolved into the role of a visual effects supervisor, which I love a lot, working with all the artists and all the different departments in the process of filmmaking. In the Badlands was one of the first projects in which, another great example of world building, where huge, vast swaths of Louisiana, and we recreated a post-apocalyptic world, and very retro steampunk envisioned world, with really cool environment extensions, and working very closely with the production designer. And it was a great experience. And from there, it's just like a very similar. We're really telling a world that's never been built. So environments are really key. It really sets part of the mood. It really tells us about the world we're in, and the stakes of the characters, and what's important from each different particular clan in this project. A really great, fun experience, and I keep going on currently to other roles as well as a visual effects supervisor. Currently at Paramount, working with the team in-house, a lot of Paramount Plus content. Rabbit Hole, which was a lot of environment work, Walker, Frasier, Hacks, and The Offer. So a good compendium there. Rabbit Hole is great. It was a good example of, like, we need to do a very quick, extensive city build and environment, playing out Toronto for New York City. a lot of espionage and shoot 'em up drama, of course. So that was part of the world building. It was an interesting synthesis, this one, in that you really had some very Ontario specific iconography and architecture, and some of it does play much more to Manhattan. And of course, it was kind of this Manhattan build, but there was quite a hybrid, piecing together these indicative, very iconic locations of the city, and of course, making them feel more of the New York blend. So this was a fun and challenging, quick project. Ones that we had a little more time with would include Paramount Plus's The Offer, which is a fantastic project and a very good LA-based nostalgia-looking, feeling environment. You really have to set the mood and be honest to the time period, and certainly make it feel as close and real and gritty as possible, and also kind of harken back and embellish in a more nostalgic and beautiful way. So we did a lot of set extension, a lot of map paintings, and complete CG builds. So interesting challenges, but it really came out really nice. Really beautiful work and very gritty and true to form. And ideally, just augmenting the reality of the world that we're in. There's a couple of really good, key, iconic Hollywood feeling moments and studio lot backdrop moments that we worked on. It's a really fun project if you get a chance to take a look at it. All right, that brings us to what we're going to talk about today a little bit more in depth, and that would be Bird Box Barcelona, which was a big Netflix project, right? So, obviously this was, do you want to go and take on something really challenging? Sure, let's do it. Right? Oh yeah, we're right in the middle of a pandemic, but it's going to be cool. It's going to be don't worry about it. And this one, actually, I'll step back a second. It's funny because I going into this and going into visual effects, the scope of this one was quite big, ambitious. So I remember watching a film like Danny Boyd's 28 Days Later, for example, and it comes to mind, like, I look at the breakdowns of that project. I go, this must have sucked. This must have been the worst, most stressful, horrendous project to shoot, a vacant London for a post-apocalyptic zombie invasion, street world. And I was like, that must have been hugely challenging. Everything must have been a visual effect. It must, hugely daunting work, and at the time, I think it was 2002, probably one of the first endeavors in that realm, again, really challenging, so I found myself in the same boat. Like, oh yeah, we're going to go to a destination city, Barcelona, Spain, obviously hugely populated, very dense, and very iconic and very identifiable, and completely shut it down. Well, it's not completely, as much as we can, and, pick our battles logistically. Yeah. How the hell are you going to do this? Right. So hugely challenging, certainly a high stress level. It's one of the more ambitious projects I've been involved with. So, it came out great. I mean, this project is really fun. It's great talent to work with, hugely adventurous, and the scope of it is pretty epic. It's, as told to me, the biggest project that's been done in Spain, in terms of scope and budget. So it was a big deal, big project, working with big producers from, large Hollywood projects and IP, like, Fast and Furious with Chris Morgan, and producers of Batman and Planet of the Apes. So like, oh yeah, some big heavy hitters, and of course some very talented local producers there in Spain as well. So jumping in at the get-go, hugely challenging. One, obviously, Spanish, sure, I can manage a bit. Catalan, of course, with the locals in Barcelona, their own language, a very specific language as well. And of course, you're in a city that you've never been. This is my first time actually in all of Europe. So jump right into it, and then let's make a movie, right? So it was great. It was very good. I think, like, we all worked together well, worked embedded with the production designers and the artists, craftsmen, painters, wardrobe artists. I mean, all departments in together, and really, brought our best game to the table, right? So, but again, this one little location still, you got a lot of life going on here. You got a lot of unadulterated, non-damaged world building. Things that have to go that are obviously human and positive. So hugely set dressing, versus what does visual effects pick up and carry the ball with, and how extensive is that build? It was a lot of calculations, a lot of logistics, and a lot of teamwork. So it was a big challenge. So in general, the key production producer, as well as the home-based visual effects vendor was Orca Studios. So doing great work, right? Working with their team internally there, and really a talented world-class visual effects facility with Orca Studios as well. And of course, working with the producers and directors and talent specifically there as well. So Orca, is fairly new. They have some really good examples. They were doing concurrently a project right as I was heading in there called Knights of Zodiac, which has a lot of very ambitious and fun and very fantastical world building. So they were in process of that while I was full bore into Bird Box. They also have a pretty fantastic virtual production team. We happen to do some virtual production, which was pretty key and integral to the whole shoot process. So again, the advantage of this, everyone, okay, virtual production, cool, it's the Mandalorian. It's like, well, there's really good applications of this technology where just it's so much better to do this. I've done this for a while. There's this environment, stunts, this was time of day and drama and stunts. This moment, particularly from the script, was 2.5, almost 3 pages of dialogue. It's a big scene. It's emotional beats are very important. It did involve stunts at the end of the scene, and of course, throw the variable in of it wants to be magic hour. It wants to be a very specific environment of Barcelona. So, this was great. I mean, we went out and, embraced the technology, shot high-res plate photography, did a high-res stitch of much of the environment. Basically, we had a better part of 360-degree views from this particular vantage point, real-time cloud simulations using Unreal technology, right? And working with stunts, working with the camera team, the actors, and it all luckily came together. And again, the advantage, if you ever shot practically magic hour, to be able to pause dramatically the lighting conditions, which in real case scenario, you're maybe talking 30 to 40 minutes a day, to be able to pull that off. But and then of course come back consecutive days if you don't make your entire day. This, we had a lot. There's a lot going on in this scene. So it really allowed us to, in the production scope, hold time, pause time, keep consistent lighting, obviously, keep things safe for the stunt. The stunt involves a character, falling, jumping off the side of this building. All right. So there's some considerations. There was a time where we needed to slow down and really do it right. And of course, give the time for our actors to give the emotional beat. It's a pretty tough scene. So it worked out fantastic. It was really good implementation. We did other virtual production technology visualizations and a lot of stunt scenes to keep things safe, to cover our butts on coverage and what we have. So we shot a lot and acquired a lot of 360 footage and stitches to build. And again, buying us that freedom of removing in pre-production, people, non-destructive environments, and kind of rebuild and kind of prep with a very compressed and fast pre-production schedule as much as we could before we started shooting, and having those assets available in camera for in-camera visual effects. So hugely challenging, but came out fantastic, and really, really proud of it. Again, working with the production designers, heads of departments, how do you inform practice? This is an example of kind of, some storyboards and kind of talking through characters going to be falling off buildings, etc. How does that play out? How do we cover it? What's our, we've got a technology, it's not going to cover the world. How do we pick our battles, and kind of informing camera, informing talent, what's our options? It was a big challenge. Money, cost benefit analysis, right, of what's possible. This was we look at things and I go, how are we going to pull this off? And just the confidence you had to have. I mean, we built the better part of two different city blocks in the same location. We were lucky enough to basically inhabit a Mercedes factory outside of Barcelona. That's on its way to becoming a high-rise section, and really just built the better part of a city street from scratch. Laying out asphalt, building up, as you can kind of see here, as much as we could play up into the bottoms of buildings that would be iconic to Barcelona and matching very strongly that whole city vibe, yet being specifically in a post-apocalyptic, damaged world, a world of suicidal mass chaos and death. So debris, environmental death, signs of chaos, cars overturned, burned out buildings. So it was like, one, control the environment. No live action. No people in the environment that we're not controlling. Two, it has to feel like it's Barcelona, so we have to control it and match it exactly, but also evolve it and tell that story of, post-apocalyptic chaos. There's something going on here. There's some, Dementor force out there, some evil, forces out there, and how does that evolve, infect our cast, and tell the story, right? So, hugely ambitious sizes of world building. Turning over the set mid-shoot as well was hugely challenging. And of course, the discussions of what is going to be intended to be green screen and what do we really want to lean into practically, it's pretty challenging. But really, you just got to think about it in your head. What is the actor going to want to interact with? What's going to tell the story on terms of physicality, stunts, getting around, navigating around the environment, and then still have that expansive, beautiful, iconic city behind you as a backdrop, but also telling still that story of like, this is not a happy world. This chaos is afoot. So yes, camera, obviously, work with the camera departments. So we did a lot of 360 shoots and stitching, as mentioned. Just keeping track all the camera technologies, the lenses, etc. As you would, planning what's the best thing, what's the best angles, how ambitious can we be with shots. It was a fun one. It was a big one, right? Some good behind the scenes here of infusing the world with terror. It's just like, as mentioned, the splits of some of the world here. It's like we don't have a lot to work with, and we're at a location that is not the location that's intended, because you can't shut down the major hub of the entire city, right? So, we had some pretty ambitious builds, and we did some really epic, wide shots that told the story of like, mass chaos and damage, and kind of figured out what can we do in pre-production, what do we want to think about ahead of time. How do I gather all that information? How do we start to build out these assets? And it was an ambitious endeavor for sure. And it's got a lot of detail, a lot of really gritty, good detail. And I think, like, in terms of our collaboration with the production side, the physical side and the practical effect side of things, gathering and scanning a lot of that data, high-res digital still and acquisition there, being loyal to that vibe of what's being established on set, and then bringing that into post, damage, decay, bodies, purses, overturned strollers, all that really cool, gritty details that really tell the story. There's a lot going on in some of these environments, and it all come together, right? So the vision, so obviously, we're working with an IP that's already been established with and very popular and project for Netflix, and that was the original Bird Box with Sandra Bullock, right? So we had to be loyal to that vibe, to that world ethos, right? And of course, the Pastor brothers did a fantastic job of rewriting and rethinking, like, staying interestingly attached to that world, but taking a new direction, obviously, which you want to do, but it is kind of that thing, that kind of vibe, because this, monstrous demonic psychosis, is kind of, is individualized, is internalized, right? So that has to be externalized for the audience. And of course, in this case, it had a very specific religious and Gothic kind of, Catholic world and vibe, as we kind of dig into the story and really figure out what, who's who and what is going on in the story, right? So there was a lot of that, and that kind of really played and spoke to how, what we wanted to see. I think, was really well integrated into things like the environment. There's some very surreal moments and visualizations that are tipping the hat to the audience as to what is going on in the story and what will be, revealed later in the story, right? So environment played a lot of role in this. I mean, we animated, sculptures, for example, to kind of, allude to this, super hyper real world, and kind of how that surrealism plays into, these characters' mindset, and who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, and then how's that going to play out, basically. So as I mentioned, the religious iconography played a big part in this. Working with the Gothic quarter of Barcelona is gorgeous. There's a lot of fantastic, beautiful churches there that we did shoot in and utilize. But there are some of those visual themes replicated throughout the rest of the world building as well. So that was a big part of it. And of course, that also really did roll into the treatment for also the visual effects, because it has kind of a weird spiritual kind of release, I would just say, without spoiling too much about the project, if you haven't seen it, for the characters and for the story. But yes, I mean, it was really the big heavy lifting was world building, was, where do we hand off and how do we treat it? Is it a map painting? Is it, is it a complete CG world? Is it a hybrid of both? Can we get away with that environment and just remove parts of it, as a shot plate, and remove contemporary happy moments and signage, and rebuild it and project, damage, decay, and grime and grit onto this, existing plates and existing world. So every different treatment known, that I've dealt with, we did a lot of set scanning, we did a lot of photogrammetry. I would love some of the current upcoming technology would have been fantastic for a lot of this, but we did shoot a lot, we did scan a lot, we did a lot of reference photography, we did a lot of environment building. So it was a big one. Okay, good. And then so again, working with in that same world of the Sandra Bullock experience, right? So of course, the other daunting challenge is, of course, they have to be blind or blindfolded. So I mean, it was a good opportunity for us to pick our battles, to really tell big epic stories in the wide shots, and then get into intimate scenes where that the characters could be inside, they could, remove masks, they could interact with each other. But again, like even on the internalized location choices and set choices on the insides, on the interiors, they were also augmented by visual effects and practical production design to really continue to tell the story. So yes, working into great locations that could work. So a lot of this was pick your battles in terms of locations. Really awesome. Obviously, centuries old locations and architecture, very hugely identifiable. Architecture and Gaudi's influence on that city, of course. But we really just leaned into it. It's like, what, if this was, just happening as a kind of same time or slightly prequel to the other original Bird Box, how would we tell that story? How far things would evolve? If mass chaos would take place in here, how does that apply to the uniqueness that is Barcelona, right? So a lot of that work, and really, big challenge, but it came out. So, no financial resources are infinite, so it was hugely challenging, it's like, and I think it was really kind of upon us to really balance out between, let's just do everything green screen, or let's just do everything as a virtual production. It's like, yeah, but no, you really want to have it gritty. You really want to feel it lived in. You really want the actors to be able to interact with the environment and be part of the environment, but also be able to be broader and tell a bigger story, you know? So there was a lot of back and forth of like, you know, just huddling with the different departments. Production design was hugely, Laia Cole was a fantastic collaborator with her contributions as a production designer from Spain. And it was great, you know, like hugely challenging, but we worked out situations where like, I've got this much budget, I've got this much budget. How do we scope and find our handoffs, and how does it work to our best, you know, abilities? And then everything that she had created, we worked with. You know, I would try to scan or photograph or have a team, you know, document and gather so that we could be of that same world, be on the same page, and also just repurpose a lot of really fantastic assets that, you know, destroy cars and just perfectly dressed and all that. So, you know, it was a lot of collaboration, a lot of back and forth, and it worked out. So again, as mentioned, the religious iconography, you know, this is very specific to this particular project, like how things are envisioned, you know, so it has a very Baroque, Gothic, you know, religious presentation to it, how people pass away, how they die, how they're killed, you know, what's going on in their mindset, you know. So there's a lot of interesting, like unique, new kind of treatments that we had to think about, like how would this look? How would this look for a particular character based on their mindset? You know, so there's a lot of that that was challenging, and you know, but it was great. I mean, I love and was very inspired by the city, and then I did a lot of, you know, location scouts and, you know, just deep dug into history. Really worked into religious iconography and kind of got in my head around the mindset of what the Pastor brothers were thinking with this visual narrative and what they could lean into. It was very specific to you know, Catholic Spanish religion, as well as indigenous to Barcelona, and really just build on that in terms of visuals. And then how does that, again, fuse into the nuances of what we already know about, you know, the mass chaos of, you know, Bird Box, which was kind of a Pacific Northwest Americana presentation, right? So then completely different revamping story, but does really build into that backstory of like, this is going on actually slightly before our Sandra Bullock movie, right? So yes, world building, right? You know, so we built a set that was as big and broad, almost basically the better part of a bottom floor, and then, you know, the extension of most of the buildings, the very iconic buildings of Barcelona, is it's a multi-purpose environment, you know, where they usually have shops and pharmacies and cafes on a ground level, and then usually housing and apartments and different living structures above it. And then, you know, how do we stay loyal to that? How do we, you know, build in chaos and grime and grit? You know, how in the hell are we going to extract and keep our talent? You know, I asked for the biggest green screens that we could possibly make, and of course, in some cases there were physical builds that you worked with the production design. In a lot of cases, they were actually moving fly swatter, you know, green screens that we could position on cranes as needed. We had 2 of those going at a time, just because, you know, we have to. It's an action movie, really. It's an action drama, you know, scary horror, and you know the camera work. You know, you can't hinder it. You really want to let it be free moving, really get ambitious shots. You know, you don't want to be. You can tell a story very stationary, but you know, we want to move around. We want to follow our action. So it was challenging. You know, there's some great breakdowns I'll show at the end here, where it's just like we can cover as much as we can cover, but everything else is going to be just a roto challenge or a different methodology to kind of extract and kind of world build. And it just came out great. It came out fantastic. You know, a huge endeavor. You know, 6 months of just principal production, and then even more closer to a year for the final post. So just a lot of work. As you can see, you know, you look at this and you just gasp at like, how are we gonna, you know, drone shots to reveal the whole world? You know, we had it when we have several of those. But again, you lean into what's available. You know, there's a lot of practical set design that we really embellished and really just brought to life. this example here of a bridge photography, but again, it's like, okay, so how do we tell the story about people killing themselves, driving trucks off of the edges of off ramps, hanging themselves, grit, debris, decay, to tell that story that this has happened, and we're living in this world for several months after the event, right? Challenges and setbacks. Yes, well, the entire experience was a huge challenge for sure. Setbacks, luckily, not many. I would say, obviously a lot of work, a huge endeavor of time. But I think really, although, and of course, with that comes great stresses, but I think to the strengths of the entire crew, everyone worked really well together and really played to each other's strengths, and overcame the challenges just by the collaboration of what's the best possible solution for something so challenging. So it worked out well. Again, we mentioned keeping it flexible, keeping sharing burdens and embellishing our strengths of what we can offer either in post or in live action production design, right? And kind of picking our battles as we go. So it's like, this is a very populated place. Are we going to do a green screen? Are we going to try to shut it down? What's the best execution of all this? It's just like the calculation was insane. Just like logistics of it. If it's going to be a screen, can we build it? Some locations are near water in historically sensitive areas, populated areas. A challenge, a huge challenge. This bottom right image here is basically the factory prior to building it. Just sitting there about level out a playing field and build this set twice. For two specific locations. So mid production we shot out the entire all scenes on the earlier locations. Went back to location work to give the production team enough time to flip that set. Luckily, as per Gaudi's very indicative layouts of those cities, the general bones and structures of those environments are generally the same, or very similar. But obviously, a lot of nuance specific to this. There was some public statues and obelisks and things in some of our secondary set flip. But no, we did a fantastic job. We also recreated it digitally as well as practically. There were some things that were very stunt specific, right? So we had to really kind of in our head say, okay, we have characters in a fight scene. It's going to take place of what's a pretty tight city or a big environment build. We want to give them the ability to do the stunt safely and have hand-to-hand combat fight scene without endangering things. So it worked out well. We knew the locations, we saw the locations, we photographed locations as much as possible. I could scan, as fast as I could, what we need and what we can have as a reference. And then how does that play into a rebuild? Like there was certainly some areas where we would need to, again, control. And we would use those as specific set build sets on basically this Mercedes factory location to come back to in order to give it more safety, more time, but had to be loyal to, again, that specific location that we already know, that we've already either photographed and then rebuild it as a duplicate. And then, of course, the practical build that the actors are interacting with, that the fight scenes that stunt people are working with, but then, oh yeah, by the way, we have to see the rest of the world. So, physicality of this location, being loyal to a location that we've already photographed, but also, it has to be extensive. It has to have nobody in it. So again, some good challenges here. This before and after is kind of telling a tale of some big world building, right? A lot of plans and a lot of logistics for sure. So yes, and again, as mentioned, accommodating, a lot of this whole fight sequence was handheld, for example, and then we'd want to move the camera and kind of get a feel for it to tell the story and to tell compelling visuals. So it's a lot of challenging tracking, a lot of challenging world building. There's cases where we can pick our battles and have green screen. A lot of things could be rotoed or treated differently, but we had to always had in our mind like how it would all come together, and really work with our DP and really get in our heads of, choices of filtration and how to replicate that for look, like this classic glimmer glass look, which Danny, our DP, implemented, and then how does that play into visual effects and how to replicate that whole treatment, production design treatments of locations and set builds. One, we're going to be there, we're going to duplicate it, then we have to replicate it here. So it had to feel the same, it had to feel gritty. And again, a lot of crazy, moving, ambitious crane shots. It was not a small budget endeavor. It was a big battle and a lot of work. Communication was key. Again, my limited Spanish skills, but we had like a pretty multinational team. Some of our talent was from America. Some of our actresses was from Germany. A lot of obviously local Spaniards, but it all worked out well. I think we all speak the cinema language, and that was really the common binding. Infusing, above beyond the battle, the Tower of Babel was all things cinema. So we really kind of got into speaking the same language. Again, with my limited Spanish skills, was able to communicate pretty effectively, and they are much better than English than I am Spanish. But working with local crews, working with local vendors, and that whole battle and treatment worked out well. But again, we speak the same cinema language. We know lens lengths, we know distances, we know blocking, we know crane shots, we know what tells a good visual compelling story, and that transcends all language and culture. Right? I mean, in most cases. Breakthroughs, yes. Well, so again, a hugely vast endeavor. So compressed production schedule. This thing was going to go into production quickly. I was brought on as fast as possible, coming off of another show. Hit the ground running, get to new location, find your bearings of entirely new city, new culture, go. And then as much as possible, production design or meetings with production design, the entire heads of departments, and kind of just huddle. How are we going to go about this treatment? What's our best strength? What we have to play against? What do we have to avoid? I think it really worked out well. I mean, as much as possible, and just a big battle, just a big creative challenge. But like this particular image here is when the entrance ways to Montjuic, which is a very iconic fort on top of the hill overlooking beautiful Barcelona. And again, like a lot of practical things that had to be removed, and of course, actually we couldn't completely shut it down, so we literally had public access while shooting. So we were dancing green screens, picking our battles, controlling light as much as possible. And it's just looking in retrospect, it was like, wow, that was really ambitious, and thankfully worked out well. So some of this, again, like you just go to some certain location and you go, okay, how are we gonna do this? How in the hell are we gonna pull this off? Like there's a lot of action sequences with this big bus crash early in the storytelling process. So a lot of huge practical effects, heavy, dense stunt work, really blocking that out in our heads of thinking like, okay, if things go awry with a practical stunt, can I recreate a digital bus? And, so how do we block this out from the most bang for a buck? We had, duplicate two buses, but we also had a smash bus for our final destination. As we would go, we would kind of document and gather and take scan data of the progression of the scene as we shot it. So we knew that if we got in trouble and or if we needed to recreate it at the end, or how that would play out for bits and pieces for continuity. So it was kind of like this, tit for tat, going with the organic nature of the stunt and how it could go practically well, or it could go practically awry, and making sure we stayed flexible to that, and gathering as we went and as we pieced together this very extensive stunt sequence, all the pieces that we would ever need, So a big challenge. I really, I would say above more than anything, I would say I really push for like as much practical as possible. You know, like yeah, we're going to be removing a lot of cameras here. There's cameras, rigs on every device. There's camera and chase cars going through every part of the sequence. We know there's going to be extensive visual effects. So I really just push for as much practical, real buses as possible. You know, and again, like, you know, the Fast and Furious team were completely on board. The stunts team was like, hell yeah, let's do that. And you know, we had a lot of cleanup. We had a lot of building. There are complete CG moments, but there's also mostly practical and just a lot of cleanup and removal of cameras and just continuity of damage based on that scene, how it played out. You know, for safety, we shot a 360 environment, did drive-through plates of the entire environment, had that as part of the backdrop to allow more extensive scenes, to allow more extensive blocking on some of the interior moments of the bus. And again, the exterior moments were, you know, rock and roll, badass, you know, collisions and drama. So I think it played out pretty well. In the middle was my big nightmare here. The fantastic, you know, there you have with this fantastic gondolas that go from Montjuic, as you can kind of see back there in the background, to you know, all across towers in Barcelona. Fantastic way to see the city, by the way. And of course was integral to our storytelling, our third act there, where the characters more or less have to escape and get, you know, to a point of refuge like Montjuic. And of course, like, okay, sure, we shot as much as we could around the practical locations of these towers, but we actually had to build a set, you know, obviously, as you can kind of see here, for the balance of it. And, you know, the challenge is it's all metal, you know, so if you see a screen, blue screen, green screen, whatever, it's going to be all about reflection. It's going to be all about all things bad, you know. In the ideal situation, we discussed and pushed for a virtual world. This tower is largely about sky. You know, there's a roof setting, there's a deck, and better part of 270 degrees, it's seeing a beautiful vista of Barcelona, right? So I think like for this was like, okay, we know that there's roto, we know that there's Lumikey, and we know that it's also about lighting. You know, it's also about getting the beautiful look and the feel, making and setting the feel of an exterior environment. We shot this in the warehouse while we were shooting this bus sequence, right? This was part of our working sets. So, you know, to play into the strengths of cinematography, to play into the strengths of the look and feel of production design, right, and all the metallics and steel that you see around it, you know, it's just like, well, okay, you know, we could work with this as a green screen. We could work with it. You know, it's too big, too ambitious. It would be almost just shy of 360 degrees, really, of an LED volume. You know, so cost prohibitive and time prohibitive. Plus, the other factor, which was very challenging, is that it's very stunt specific. So the gondolas, it's not just a beautiful environment with a few birds flapping around. It has a working gondola. That working gondola is part of a very specific stunt sequence. So it's just like, well, okay, then we have to calculate performance, timing. It's like, or we do that part of it in post. It's just like, okay, let's just offer the flexibility of doing the majority of the environment in post. We did have a practical duplicate of this in gondola that they do interact with, that they do work with, you know, so that worked out well because we really mixed and matched digital performances with practical physical performances, and really just, you know, in our heads said, you know, this is going to be a beautiful vista, you know, and from shooting at the location, you know, and getting early test and footage from shoot and coverage from previous days, we kind of have a feeling of how it would look, how it would feel. And I really would, you know, push with our DP, Danny, you know, this feel should be kind of, you know, bright, beautiful, you know, hazy, atmospheric, the Bay of Barcelona here, and you know, and just lean into that look, and then give them the flexibility of lighting without, you know, constraining, you know, and getting lighting implemented in there while also letting a green screen to also be hugely, you know, limiting to the creative look and feel of this as well. So I mean, it really worked out well for you know, it was more of a heavy lift for us, obviously, in post, but it really just worked in the strengths of what is possible. For lighting and for environment, and keep the actors, you know, flexible and be able to, you know, have access to the entire environment. But, you know, again, world build and also very specific stunts. So again, yet another hugely challenging literal leap of faith. And if you see the project, that will also play into this as well. So yeah, a big endeavor. So here we go. So talking about problem solving and similar issues, as I mentioned previously, we planned on shooting the better part of this location, Montjuic, this classic castle tower, very gorgeous and fantastic view. Could not shut down it completely. Also, we had to build in as much as possible the kind of more or less a survival camp. Again, as the ethos of this world, it's for people who are surviving, it's how do you live after the event, right? Some situations like going into this tower, were hugely challenging in that, one angle is pretty good. We look out into the bay, that's pretty neutral. There's a few boats here and there that probably shouldn't be there, but we can pick our day, pick our battle. The reverse is on this situation. We're looking into the better part of a hugely populated street with a lot of traffic and concerns of, Mario Casas, our actor, is a pretty popular actor as well, and he draws a lot of attention, if he's found. So we picked our battles. We did as much as screens and isolation as we could. A lot of it was in camera. I know a lot of the stuff is there's car crashes and stunts and flames, and just leaned into what was there and just picked our battles as to, I know we can remove this. I know we can paint out those few people see there in the deep background here. Here, we really have to have an intricate moment where we really want to have a very specific treatment. It is much more about the background for this particular angle. Let's go ahead and use a screen treatment here. So, and again, the local crew is fantastic to work with. And I think we all really came out with our best game and really played to our strengths, and it just worked out. So ecstatic that it could, and there's situations here where, there are some things that were production design specific. And again, I'm a huge fan of the practical and getting it in camera. The illustration here is an example of, okay, it has to have that surreal iconography. And again, we want to have the flexibility of it seeming like it's moving and following with us as we walk around it. So, we leaned into and thought about troubleshooting and kind of R&D'ing the look depth of some of this visual iconography, and kind of worked out of that in pre-production, and then the cool thing is we really just, took assets back and forth and figured out working with production designers and traditional artists, and kind of take that and brought that into the post world as well to give it control, to give it, in this case, animation and life, So there's a couple moments of those with relief sculptures, paintings of the seers, to kind of make this all work and kind of give it some life and work together. Okay, and then so yes, breakthrough moment. This is a good angle here, dangling above Doom here. It was hugely ambitious, huge challenges shutting down better part of a city and or removing people or building out assets that match the environment in different environments. It was a beast. It was a lot of work and a lot of challenges and a lot of leaps of faith, and just, we can do this. It's going to be more difficult in this way. Allowing for the flexibility of all the different apartments. Again, the storytelling is key. The performances are key. How do we do this with keeping people safe in this particular situation and build out as much possible around it, and still tell a compelling story. And I think it really all just worked out pretty well. So, a hugely ambitious project. The learnings. What did I learn? What did I learn from this project? One is flexibility. One is keep flexible with our journey to filmmaking. It's like things are going to go awry. We had rain days, and we planned upon that. We had shutdowns. We had COVID events. We had actors who got sick. We had it all. And just roll with the punches for sure. Keep flexible, keep optimistic, keep happy, be positive, be creative. And a lot the stuff, the entire crew was fantastic. Just interesting challenges. Stresses for sure. It's going to weigh on everyone in the crew, but I think it all played out really well. And really cool environments, just beautiful historical environments, and just being able to again stay flexible, covering your bases, really just playing three-dimensional chess in your head of like, what do I need to do? What happens if it doesn't go right? How do we go about recreating this to accommodate a stunt, to accommodate talent, to accommodate location, to remove people. How do we piece this multifaceted beast together to make it all work? And it all did work out well, right? So yeah, I think, again, we were all on the same mindset and kind of thought about it in a very similar way. We all collaborated early in the pre-production process in a fast, compressed way. There's concessions back and forth of like, I don't have a big enough budget. I can't do this. Can you cover this? And the back and forth. And I think, it's a process you go with everyone in all the different departments and really just make it work, right? So, but I think, you got to also be subservient to the bigger picture, the storytelling process, and kind of keep that in mind of how that all works together. And I think this did come out well. Was a hugely ambitious project that does hit all the marks and looks pretty gorgeous. And the visual effects I'll show you here at the end are pretty effective. So yeah, don't stress. Don't stress to those variables outside your control. Yes, like as aforementioned, the bus sequence was piecing together and progressive stunt sequences is one of the good of many examples where things could go completely awry. If they do, what's our game plan and how do I pick up the ball with visual effects and carry on as things don't work out? And it's always going to be times of rehearsals and you have dramatic revelations of like, that's not really going to go as we planned. How do we go about this? And stay flexible with it. Don't stress can focus you like a diamond, right? You just get used to it. And again, our little panda bear here on a camera card. Keep happy, keep optimistic, and keep on moving. Keep bringing it and deliver awesome. So there's some good, lovely pictures of some gorgeous moments here. But yeah, being honest to the creative goals and trust your intuition. It's like, yeah, there's some cases where this is really challenging and there's no clear path forward. And just like, I believe in my head, this is going to be the best execution of this particular visual effects, and how we can ever go about it. So certainly challenges, certainly leaps of faith, knowing, everything is possible, but there are limitations with, technology, with time and budget, obviously, and can we do it creatively? Yes. Where do we want to play to in terms of our strengths, and it all came together. It's just, it worked out well for something so challenging. Creative empathy. Yeah. So here you go. Again, it's all about performance, right? It's all about storytelling. So, giving that flexibility, allowing the talent to be able to move in spaces, not hindering them, working with them. The talent was fantastic to work with. We're all coming together in very cold conditions or very hot conditions and very gritty, city streets and crazy moldy spider webby locations as well. It really played into the gritty, grimy horror effect of it all. But again, how do we work with this? How do we get the actors the most flexibility with their performance and really just stay loyal to our visual effects as well? And then as our outro, I would say, there's a lot to synthesize, to calculate this particular project. There's obviously, as you can imagine in your head, a huge amount of challenges. A lot of this was visual storytelling, and a lot of this was environment. We want to tell you the story that we're in this beautiful city, and now it's just completely destroyed, and there's no one there, or very little, and the people that are there are all suspect. There's devoid of humanity, but the people who are alive are why are they there? What's their backstory? How are they surviving? It's a lot of misdirection. It's a lot of mistrust. It's a lot of there's a lot of moments of faith in some of the people and the characters and their humanity. And this is a good example of a very small build and set extension of the rest of the world building, and just pick our battles of where we can tell the story of suicide and decay and the rest of it. Overturned vehicles and the handoffs from practical and visual effects are fantastic and bloody seamless, I would say. A lot of this was, again, kind of really coming to it at the get-go, thinking about it, like, what can we do? How do we go about it? Looking back to reality as much as possible, building out the physical realities is always as much as possible. Looking to what, photo reference of reality of disaster events, and kind of, letting that inform your world building is always part of the story, and then also mostly embellishing it to how do we tell that creatively as well, But again, I think very much so this environment and the better part of the city is all about, a whole character, and you see the iconography of some of these seers, and it is, part of the storytelling process as well. Yeah. So yeah, despite language difficulties and being on the opposite side of the world, jumping into a completely new culture, a new location where I know nothing about anything specifically yet, other than what I've read, running around the streets and getting it all and gathering it was just, a huge endeavor, But I think, luckily, the local talent, the local crew, with their help and with my visual effects background, again, a fantastic synthesis of all of it. Again, sharing the burden of the load of, what can be done practically, what can be done digitally. Where do we pick those battles? Where do we do those handoffs? And what's the best choice? So a lot of that, but came out well. And that is it. I think I'm going to go, if I get a chance here, let's go ahead and take a look at a quick breakdown here, and then kind of tell the story more impactful than my my conversation here. Let's see if I can get this guy to play. Oops, did pop up. There we go. Take a look at some fantastic work. Here's some locations, and here's some works from Bird Park, Barcelona. Well, there you go. So yeah, as you can imagine, not a light endeavor, but came out well.
All right, let me jump in again here. So let's see if there are some questions actually. All right, but first of all, huge thanks for the presentation. I mean, I love this stuff. I didn't have the chance yet to watch it, but I definitely want to do that. Yeah, so I took a bunch of notes, but let's actually also see. There's no question yet. I guess they're all blown away. So let's
Awestruck
wait.
and gobsmacked, yes. No, I mean, that's literally how I felt going into this. Like, how in the bloody hell? I mean, like, that whole story of, like, thinking about 28 days later and then, like, yeah, that's nothing compared to the scope of, how much we had to do and recreate. And everything is a build or a choice of practical versus a set build, and, how that all comes together for sure. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of that is just, like I mentioned, three-dimensional chess of how it is possible and how we could possibly do it. But we shot a lot, we scanned a lot, and did a lot of photogrammetry, a lot, set texture reference as much as possible, build from scratch of environments. But I think, again, leaning into the best part of production design, we gave a good building space to kind of start with. There's certainly times we had to augment even in that space, in that original foreground plate. But beyond that, at least it's had a really good greedy foundation to build on. And again, really, as much as honestly we could extend those worlds, or in some cases it's 50-50, as you saw with some of the stunt gags. So it's like almost every treatment known to man of practical and physical stunts, physical set design. How does that mirror and merge, blend in with visual effects, and how do we serve that common goal? So a lot of that, hugely challenging endeavor.
It's pretty incredible.
Fun world building, especially if you love the architecture of that city.
Can you elaborate a little bit about let's say the logistics between Netflix in the States and then kind of, let's say, going over and working or in Spain or in Barcelona? How did that collaboration work, or is there, let's say, also, because I know that Netflix is investing quite a lot more in kind of in the European spaces, also in, let's say, Portugal and so on, for other let's say, more episodic productions. But is there, let's say, or was there a Netflix, let's say, counterpart in Spain that you collaborated with, or was it just a production, the production teams that were more, let's say, more local with the VFX studio that you mentioned? Orca Studios.
Orca Studios, yeah, and Adrian Guerra is the producer there, who's done a lot of fantastic local productions for Barcelona and Spain. No, I think so. Obviously, Netflix is global. They have the local indigenous Spanish market is huge unto itself, and there's like this huge community of like horror fans, and that I've stumbled upon, and they've kind of approached me after the fact when we kind of worked on this project, and so it's there's VFX managers that are local to Spain, so worked with them specifically. Their job was really just to say, what do you need? Is everything going to come together as we planned? Is there any red flags? How is this all going to work out? And then, but luckily, the local producers where there are, obviously been working for many years, for all their lives in Barcelona, and storytelling, and have a great relationship with Netflix, so that worked out fine. But I mean, it was really just syncing up with the production team, with them, with their strengths, with their connections. They reached out and brought teams from abroad. There were some British crew members. There was French. There was German talent. There American talent. So multicultural, like the city is, and a lot of resources. But really, it's funny because the American teams came in, and the American producers, like the Fast and Furious team and like the Planet of the Apes team, Batman team, they all had their own take on things, and they very much wanted to ramp up and make things big, and as much as possible. It was back and forth of like, we have the budget for this, right? We're going to cover our butt for this, right? We got this, because it can be hugely out of control quickly. There's it's just the scope of it was massive, and as much as we could do it practically, we did, and as much as we needed to do a lot of visual effects, which there are, we picked our battles. We did it as best we could in pre-production and solved all our problems and stayed flexible when things did go awry or when things were better suited in the situation that we didn't think about before. Again, that was pretty minimal, though. I think things largely went, there were a lot of sides of relief getting through these different hurdles through the process of shooting this project. And it all came together. I mean, again, there were setbacks. There was COVID shutdowns. There was, locations weren't working with us, or people, the usual things that happen in production. You just got to roll with it and play to your strengths. So it worked out well. But yeah, there's a whole structure. They're very much versed in production, and all the same entities and people I know from there, and actually a lot of on the visual effects team, like Adrian Puello is a fantastic compositor and now visual effects supervisor, just a really talented guy, and so many people that we keep in chat rooms with all the time and discuss the technology and all that, and now we get to work with them, which is fantastic. So it's great. And in some cases, it's funny, a lot of the local crew would ask me if I knew American talent or crew members that work with them, especially practical makeup effects. And it's like, oh yeah, I worked with Stan Winston, or it's like, oh, I worked with this team for John Wick. It's just like, it's a weirdly small community, even though because it's such a global community. So yeah, it was great. A lot of commonalities.
Very cool. I see there's a question coming, but I'm gonna sneak in one myself. So
Sure.
Maybe it might be a little bit an odd, let's say, comparison, but because for me, I haven't seen a movie yet, but seeing that, or kind of the comparison between how much was, let's say, you mentioned this lot, the Mercedes factory, right? So kind of if you would have to estimate on how much, let's say, physical film set area, environment wise, you had in addition, or let's say accumulated for whatever the locations were where you actually physically filmed, and then how much, let's say, area is that translated into in the movie. So where the actors walk through the different areas, how much area what's the ratio of actual film set size to physical size that is in a movie world, in the movie realm? Because I'm really interested or intrigued about, because it seems you mentioned you scanned, you reused so many things, and you had even to remodel the entire set mid-production for a let's say second part of the story. Because it sounds like incredibly space efficient. Can you elaborate on that?
No, I mean, yeah, you're right. It did work out well. We had a clean slate to work with, a blank canvas more or less, with a 1970s Mercedes factories that was getting torn down, and it really served for. It also served the location. It also served for the bus interior. So the bus sequence with the chase scene was there. The outside, we built out the same general bones of the city structure, city block, more or less. I'd say 2 city blocks in terms of, or block and a half to almost 2 city blocks of space, physicality wise. We built up to the first floor and did a hard green screen handoff from that point up. And actually, fairly similar to the John Wick treatment. I know we did some research on other things. We did, the similar projects like the Boston Marathon movie with Wahlberg is drawing a blank now, but the same thing for city blanks, for city builds, and then set extensions on top of that. So I think the physicality of that building was, in a football terms, probably like almost 300 plus yards of space. We had, I think it was a 40-foot green screen wall built, right? So we worked with the production designers to kind of build out a hard painted green screen that we knew that we always would look back into something that we always had to recreate on the reverse angles. You know, much of the footage, much of the coverage is looking into the set build again, but we can't cover the world. You know, there were some 50-50 splits where we saw, you know, the side of a building and you know, kind of an extension out into the deeper part of the world. You know, it's a big space, a big world. The ratios, and there was no like consistent ratios. I mean, you know, it really just depends on the shot you needed, you know, and you kind of had to be flexible with that. It's like, well, we're seeing everything we don't want to see. And it really just, you want to think of it as a compositor and really how the technology would work. You know, you'd like, okay, we're seeing the sky. I could probably key that hair off the sky, you know, like it's really just protect, you know, play to your strengths and protect what you can work with. I know we worked with Nalia, the little German actress, little girl who was fantastic. You know, so for her, you know, the environment, okay, we got to do this as a Lumikey treatment. And it's like, okay, well, she's you know, her hair is strikingly blonde, and white on white is not going to work fantastically well. So when we pick those battles, can we get a green screen in there on a lot of this coverage and just like, okay, if we're going to get that coverage, can we just get up a little bit higher so we play her on deck until we get her into these key moments here and just, you know, it's a little bit more contained because it's an action sequence with big dramatic moments as well. So it was a bit of working back and forth with like what can play for action, you know, when can we play her off deck? When can we frame her into the world as needed? So there were moments where I was able to get a little bit of green screen work in there, but a lot of that was just like, you know, as much as it was just an environment dome of light, playing the lighting through silks, and of course because you're going to see it on every angle. So, and a lot of that was just pick your battles and just working and being you know, collaborative with the DP, with the grip department, with what they could offer, you know, and just. You know, it all came together. It's just like, it was just, you know, thinking it out what's best. And there's a lot like, wow, this is going to be rough. I hope we can make this, but, you know, be true to yourself and, you know, play to your strengths and make it all work. And, you know, I think the support team of the producers, both American and Spanish, where it's also played out well. They also, you know, if there's anything you need, if you need to go above and beyond, we're going to get this project done and really just give you that strength to say like, yeah, we're going to make it happen, you know, and try to be reasonable with it, but you know, but it did work out. It worked out well. So, so scale and scope is big. I mean, it really just changed all the time. And there's times where, you know, it's funny, like even on the LED wall solution, this is like, this is great, but what would really be cool is this angle, you know. And of course, you're just like not really prepared for it. And in those cases, you're like, okay, let's play it to the best it can be, and we know we can make this work. And you know, is there a better angle that can make it work? And just work and stay flexible with the rest of the team, with the talent, the directors, the actors, the director of photography, and just, you know, make it all come together.
Very, very cool. All right, let's jump over to the other question, which is coming from Roman. So his question is, do you have any tips for working in smaller teams or solo when it comes to virtual production?
For virtual production, for tips for a smaller team. Well, I mean, the advantage of virtual production, I would say, is that it's a different mindset, it's a different paradigm. You're thinking of it ahead of time. You know, you're thinking that asset, that build is almost the same working paradigm as a production designer. You know, you really want to be done and ready on the day. You know, so it's like you're building your set in pre-production, just like you would a traditional production designer, right? So in a lot of those cases, we did that. So like we had to back roll in our head for the virtual production of like, okay, we don't have this magic hour city. Let's schedule in our schedule in pre-production, go out and find the time to go out and shoot that element, shoot that new coverage, give post enough time to stitch and treat and remove and, you know, make beautiful and build out and everything else we needed for that environment. Oh yes, and also it needs to work with the engine and be able to give you drifting clouds and kind of augment the beautiful realities there. So it's like, you know, traditional comping techniques as well as, you know, a live action performing simulation. But it's really about pre-rolling all that stuff. And I was lucky enough to do it on other shows like right before, first environment was or first endeavor with virtual production was Perry Mason for HBO, which was a fantastic experience, which is also a beautiful beautiful project about historical storytelling of lovely Los Angeles, right? So hugely challenging there, but a lot of historical research there, because we're telling a story back in the post World War II, pre World War III kind of world set there, and the evolution of locations and all that fun stuff was hugely challenging. Doing all that research up front, kind of getting it all built out ahead of time, and then giving your time. We had enough time to, luckily, while shooting on, usually on weekends, we go and kind of check out things of like, okay, well, let's go ahead and check out, take a look at it, let's talk, let's see what there's anything we have to be aware of. And there were certainly like, discussions with production design, how big, in our case of our virtual world building for the LED solution, it also had to involve a stunt, and the character had to be in a shot. Coverage and called for the person to jump off, fall off the edge, or commit suicide. And then, okay, so how do we get there? Plus, we also have a volume, so we have to build a stage at least high enough to have a character disappear, fall off the edge. So has to have a stunt. Is your stunt bag, and then it has to double for other stuff like the religious iconography of the girl levitating above. Same thing there. Like, so for that, like, we're not quite sorted out with it. It's a very visceral, surreal moment. Let's keep the flexibility of just flipping the screen to green screen so we can shoot on the same location, but have some flexibility with that in post. So, I mean, the cool thing with that technology is you can do both. You can be like, all right, this we're going to keep it flexible because it's more surreal. It's more, animation. It's more, clouds and God rays and all that fun stuff. And keep the flexibility of changing it post, and then also committing to the strength of all the beauty and all the hardcore nuances of lighting and environments that the LED volume has to offer. So do it right. If you do it right up front and make all those calculations up front and ahead of time in pre-production. We went back and checked what we shot. We threw up works in progress on the backgrounds as we were working on it with post. So the post team was working while we're shooting. We shot plates, delivered plates, prep plates, build out those environments, come back, check it out, take a look at it, see what's going to work, inform the DP as to options, look at the directing team and give them an idea of sensibility and kind of what's possible. So we kind of check back and forth. It was a lot of working on assets and gathering plate photography and working out simulations concurrently while shooting in production. Then knowing they were going to come back to that schedule and expend the better part of a day shooting that entire sequence. But again, it's just flipping it backwards. Everything post becomes pre-production. So you really just want to make all your plans and really kind of go in the game plan of saying, this is going to be a final asset, and this is how it's going to play out. And if you do that and you play those strengths, like the build we did for Perry Mason was a highly reflective biplane. So metal, lacquered paint, period piece, chrome, glass, all things bad when you're going into it. We're thinking of screen technologies. So suppression is going to be a nightmare. You're going to see the world. You're going to see lights in the chrome. It's just going to be everything horrendous. But we went and shot, huge aerial plates and hung a plane in Paramount's stage 5, the biggest stage there, with a huge solution, like 40-foot LED wall, and was able to use that, hang that plane and basically get it all on camera. We take our shots, get the flexibility of the DP. Again, we did all the plate photography. We color timed the plates to make sure it was kind of as we wanted it to be without affecting it in post. So, I mean, it's just really just doing all those calculations up front. The cool thing about that technology, it's like, oh, it's just too expensive and no one could do it. It's like, if you wanted to, you could do, and I have animator friends, it's like, if you wanted to do a small LED solution just on your desktop, you could, really just work out even on a pre-production schedule, or even just as a hobbyist or living room creator can kind of work with all that technology and make it work for your, like a scaled down version of it and just play to its strengths. Like I see it done well for commercials, for small, very nuanced animation and practical animation things. And oh, by the way, it's also going to be an LED environment behind there. It's like, there's no reason why you can't do that. And I think like that, we went into this technology with artists like Jason Favreau, John Favreau, sorry, to come into this technology with like, I think we could do this. And just like, and much of visual effects has been that like guessing game technology and bleeding edge technology and just pushing the boundaries between technology and the creative intent. And like, it seems like we can do this, and it seems like it works. And these are the strengths of what it has to offer in terms of our storytelling arsenal, and let's go with it. So, yeah.
But I mean, like Bird Box, or what we saw in your presentation about Bird Box is that it almost felt to me while listening to your explanations, and it's just another tool in the arsenal that you had access to. I mean, there's so many things that you can do physical, in the sense of directly shooting it, and there's green screen elements, and then there are certain aspects that or certain things that you can do with a green screen. And depending on, let's say, green screen, virtual production, right? But then there are also certain aspects that you just have to consider based on the logistics. Let's say bringing in a physical bus and crash it in a virtual production might be technically possible if you have a gigantic thing, but then also the whole logistics of that might say, okay, let's maybe pick another approach to actually try and solve this. But I guess it always depends on the project. It depends on the size of the stages that you have, or let's say especially virtual production. And then also it's not only a, let's say, technical question of which solution you would like to use. It's just another tool, right? And some factors you might need to consider.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's always how that tool fits in with the solution. Like what are you trying to do technically? What are you trying to do with the story? What are the, is it stunt? Like, your case scenario, like to do that stunt, no way. To do a bus stunt, there's no way for that. I mean, we did do similar, like we did do 360 capturing of images, and the interiors, like we talked about, but the part of the discussion was the interior stuff could be that. We shot places that could work in an volume situation, and that would be plausible. But I mean, we just went with virtual green screen for the interiors, and one advantage was we had pretty mucked up and dirty windows. So there's a lot of filter light. There wasn't a really clean view outside the windows. There really wasn't much about the environment anyway. It's a really quick cutting stunt. So you really have to calculate in your head, like, what's the intent of this moment? What actually has to happen physically, logistically? What do we see, and what do we want to see? What do we want to avoid and not see? And really, in those moments, it's just about quick, dramatic, human performances of stress and duress, and like your classic, like bus speed 2 speed action sequence. So it's really about emotions and quick. It's more about the close-ups in the interior. So the background in those moments are pretty inconsequential. The physicality of getting the bus from A to B was usually very much visceral and very much real. And there's discussions back and forth of like, how many buses can we have? You can just add CG buses back there, and it's just like, we can do a lot of, we can make a lot of choices and spend a lot of money in visual effects, but like, why? I think like for us, I really, let's take money out of the visual effects budget and spend it on practical rentals of buses. A lot of the buses we had were barely functional, but they looked okay. But I mean, it really gave us a really gritty build to have, a real reality to work with. It gave the stunt performers things to really physically maneuver around. The buses are metallic, so to do it digitally is like, I can do it. And of course, but it's got to reflect and have all the environments, the car crashes, the stunts, the sparks have to reflect in the buses. So it does become a much more, deeper dive into visual effects if we do it that way. And it's really it's about talking about the location and the environment. It's not nothing we can't have. It doesn't have to perform in a very specific way. The bus physicality and the stunts of that did, but for that, pretty much, again, it was kind of a moving chess piece to kind of piece it together in a linear way as we went through the sequence, as we went through each stunt event, to make sure that if things went awry, we had a cover your butt moment of having scans as we progressed through it in terms of continuity. So we could do it digitally, and we did scan it as an asset. We scanned it as much as we could. The talent we scanned for a lot of those walking scenes are completely digital doubles of the performers. You know, a lot of the environments, as much as we could, we scanned. A lot of the hero stunt pieces I would scan as physical builds and do a digital recreation of it. So if we knew it had a very key stunt performance or emotion or beat. So, you know, so it was a lot of that back and forth, and just leaning into just really having discussions and thinking about it with, like, you know, what are we trying to tell? What's the best execution for it? And there was a lot of back and forth. Like, again, I don't have budget for it, or like, you know, I've got budget, but I'd rather you do it practically. And then let's just, you know, we're going to do a crap ton of removals on the bus sequence of, you know, camera cars, there's GoPros, there's camera rigs inside buses, there's probably at least seven different cameras rolling at the same time, plus car chasing on cranes. So, and times where we see it and we need to remove it. So we knew there's a bunch of that going into it, and just piecing together and keeping track of it and looking at it and seeing how it's going to go together and figuring it in your head. We also had a concurrent editorial team that would be editing all the time, and at times on weekends we'd come and go to and look at sequences and see how to play out. So we kind of had a sense of where we were. We also had playback that was quite effective of doing lineups, and, you know, a really good in-camera keys to kind of check lineups and kind of think about how things get pieced together to make sure that we're all on the same page. You know, make sure that it's everyone's going to get, you know, that whole creative sympathy. You know, am I giving the directors enough to kind of work with it? Is the performance and the actors, they have enough room, space, control, flexibility to get the performance they want? Like all that, you know, had to be factored in.
All right, let me quickly check again. There's currently no other questions from that side.
Okay.
Now, I'm gonna just briefly check on the ICE Discord. So yeah, for those that do want, we can collect more questions also on the Discord side, obviously. Yeah, no, so I think it's almost time to slowly wrap this first day up. Just maybe last question for you, Martin. Is there something similar Bird Boxy on the horizon?
Oh, like what is next? Well, I mean, so with Paramount, you know, again, so the offer was great because it was very much of that ilk in terms of environment work. But I mean, like, you know, the scope of the work I do is everything. It's you know, some creature character work, a lot of environment builds. You know, a lot of it is the nuts and bolts of fixing and removing, and the sins, the cinema sins of what happens in production, and that's certainly part of the game as well. But no, I think on the horizon there is a lot of Paramount has a lot of westerns, shall we say, with the Taylor Sheridan ecosystem, right? So there's a lot of you know, historical pieces which I love. So we are, you know, during this little pause we had here with what has gone on in Hollywood, to take advantage of some of that time to build out assets, to look ahead of schedules and kind of talk with production crews of see what scripts are needed, we'll see what assets are needed, see what things that, you know, kind of the same working process. It's like, okay, I'm going to need snow. We're shooting in New Mexico. You know, what do you have? What can you do for physical simulation? You know, just kind of, you know, looking out and forecasting what can be needed. You know, what kind of assets we could build. You know, I might need a mountain lion, a coyote, in these particular things it calls out for. We may want to do this digitally. Think about that. So we've been building assets for particular shows and particular projects that are episodic coming back. You know. And, you know, working with different technologies as well, you know, AI, and kind of deep diving into some of those technologies for particular projects as well, as I turn this off the phone. But yes.
All right.
I would say those big the big callbacks right now, the things that we're planning on the horizon. But I mean, potentially a big Las Vegas build as well for Hacks, which is an HBO project. In terms of environment, in terms of things like that, that's some good examples of things we're working on.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Yeah, but then let's actually wrap it up at this point. Thank you so much, Martin. Then I'm just gonna run my last couple of slides, and then we are gonna call it a day, at least over here. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Martin, and have a great rest of the day. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.